Hi, and welcome to the S.J. Childs Show. I'm your host, S.J. Childs. S.J. Childs Show brings value to families through education, resources, and lots of laughs. You can find us on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. You can also find our special children's books at sjchilds.org. Thank you for all of those who have hosted me on your podcasts. Enjoy the show. Hi, and thank you for joining the S.J. Childs Show. I'm your host, S.J. Childs, and today our special guest is Lark Dean Galley. She's an author, a mom, and an amazing woman who has an amazing story to share with us, and just a conversation that needs to be front line and center for not only now, but just for everyone in the future as well. Hi, Lark. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my message with your audience.
Absolutely. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I was born in Utah, but I moved all around the United States. I went to a different school every year of my life. My father was very adventurous, and even though he was well educated, he just had a hard time holding still. And it wasn't until he was in his 50s that we found out that he was bipolar. So he's pretty much his whole life, you know, the ups and downs that come with that. He had inherited that from his mother, who had inherited it from her mother, and it was quite prevalent throughout my father's side of the family, and which affected, you know, his family greatly, and obviously our family, because for a while we didn't even know that. And then in his once he was diagnosed in his 50s, we kind of looked back and said, oh, that's why life was, you know, crazy. And I came back to go to the University of Utah, lived here for a while, then went to the Bay Area for 4 years, and then I came back to Utah, and I've been here for 25 years now. I had my family here, my kids, my husband, and I'm an entrepreneur, so I have several of my own businesses. And then just 2 years ago, my life took a huge turn and went in a direction that I never saw before.
Yeah, and I'm happy. Is there a good way to say I'm excited to talk about this subject? I want to be able to support this subject. And that's why it's so important for us to have this conversation. Tell us about that story about what happened 2 years ago.
Sure. Let me back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
So 7 years ago, my father, who was bipolar and was, you know, just struggled his whole life. He died by suicide. So this was in January 2014. And at the time, I could not talk about it. So if you can remember, you know, back in the day, you didn't say the word suicide. You know, it was taboo. It was something that was looked down on, and we just didn't talk about it, and it cast a whole shadow over the family.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even tell my best friends how my father actually died. I couldn't physically say it. And it put me into this 5-month dark hole depression, where as the executor, I would go to meetings, I would take notes. And then 2 days later, I would come out of those meetings, I'd look at my notes and I would say, this is my handwriting, but I don't know what the notes say. And I don't even remember being in this meeting. And that's what overwhelming grief can look like. It can affect us. You know, even though I wasn't very emotionally close to my father, and I personally didn't think that his passing would have a very big effect on me, we don't know how that's going to happen, right? We don't know how someone else's death is going to affect us. And it obviously did for 5 months. I don't remember showering. I don't remember how my kids got fed, right? I don't remember anything during those 5 months. And so then fast forward 5 years after that, which would have been 2 years ago, just a few days ago, in March 2019, my 19-year-old son also died by suicide. And I started to go into that black hole where I was ashamed, all the stigma around suicide. I didn't want to talk about it. And I felt awful. I wanted to hide in my house, and I felt that same black hole start to take me over and to suffocate me. And two things happened that sort of made me open my eyes. The first was that I realized that if I allowed myself to go into this black hole, that my husband might not be there when I came out. My other children might not be there when I came out because we were struggling with this overwhelming grief. The other thing that happened was several of my friends reached out to me, and they told me of their concern for their children who were also struggling. They were concerned that their children would attempt to take their lives. And these were children, teenagers that knew my son. And if you're familiar with suicide amongst youth, it's the copycat suicide.
Yeah.
It's, one starts, then another, and because they think, well, so and so did it, and they were able to get out free of pain, and I just want the pain to stop, and life is overwhelming, and I don't know what to do. And I had a wake up call, and I realized that my situation was not about me. It wasn't whether I was a good mother or a bad mother. It wasn't whether, why didn't I know? Why didn't I see this? It wasn't about my son and his struggle and what he didn't tell us. It was about the opportunity to save these lives of these other kids. And my mission suddenly became trying to help other parents see that suicide wasn't outside their home, it was right in their home.
Yeah.
That their kids could be struggling in ways that they had no idea. Because I certainly felt like I was complacent. And after my son died, that's when I found out that suicide is the number one killer of youth in Utah. It's the number 10 killer of youth nationwide. And I thought, here I am thinking I'm such a good parent. Why didn't I know that the statistics on this? Why didn't I have conversations with my children? Why didn't I talk to them? And I thought, other parents need to know this information. And it has been my unrelenting mission these past few years to help wake people up.
Yeah. And I think that that's so, I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but what it's so empowering what you are bringing from that and what you're bringing to these families in need. You and I we spoke before the show, but I didn't even, I had previously of course thought to talk to you about this, but I didn't get to it. But something I've never shared before either, that can't believe I'm going to share this too, but that my grandfather also passed by suicide. And again, I nobody in my family has ever spoken about it. I've never spoken to my dad or to any family members about it. So something definitely new for me to to uncover, right? To uncover and deal with my own feelings about this. But one thing you and I had talked about a long time ago was that I also have a 21-year-old, and we spent 12 or 13 years going to counseling with her. And it was just such a struggle to know how to help her. And one thing that really, really resonated with me, something you said in a networking group that you and I had attended together, was don't stop checking in with your kids. Don't stop checking in. And, sometimes me personally, when I, see that maybe she was seeking attention by, in online or whatever. And I thought, oh, come on, girl, but at the same time, now that I have this new information, it's reminded me, just check in with her, because this is her way of expressing how she's feeling. And although I might not understand, it doesn't mean that I can't support her and get her, just the love that she needs to get through the situation.
Exactly. Our kids are dealing with so much. And I'm sure that there are a lot of parents out there who think like I used to think, oh, I can parent the way I was parented. I grew up, I was fine, things worked out for me. But that's not the case in the world that our children live in. It is completely different from when we were kids. We didn't have to deal with 1,000 other kids knowing about our most embarrassing moment in school, right?
Yeah.
and all of our weakness and our insecurities, and seeing other people, come along and they're having a great life, but I'm not. And as adults, we can sort of, kind of take away and say, yes, there's some Hollywood-ish behind what other adults are posting. Their life is not completely perfect.
Yeah.
As a teenager, that's a little bit harder, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting a little visit by my son DJ. DJ has autism, and DJ likes to just pop in and visit once in a while. And so it's hard sometimes when we stop him from doing it. Then it causes a little bit more issues. So we're trying out allowing him to just come in and trying to give him that space to join us because
hi, DJ.
excited. DJ, can you say hi?
Hi.
Hi,
How old are you?
Hi.
Tell her how old you are.
Hi. What's your name?
Her name is Lark.
Hi, Lark.
Hi, DJ.
Thank you. You want to go back with Dad? Okay. Thanks for visiting. Thanks so much, Lark. Yeah, we realized last week when it was just somebody had mentioned, we said, oh, it's so hard. We're like always wrestling with him outside the door. And they said, hey, why don't you just show it? It's part of autism life, right? And we kind of realized and thought, yeah, absolutely, right. This is a good experience for those watching that don't understand or don't know what it's like to have a child with autism. So,
well, I think that's kind of like showing your truth and showing what really is happening and not trying to hide stuff. And I look back on my father's suicide, and I'm sure you can relate this with your grandfather's suicide, that if I don't talk about it, it will go away or nobody needs to know.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I started talking about my son's suicide, and then I could talk about my father's suicide, that I was able to start healing from both of those. And it took me, over 5 years to realize that my not talking about my father's suicide stopped me from healing.
Yeah.
And I have come to realize that the most freeing thing we can do is to talk about what is really happening.
I agree.
And when we do that, then we don't have to pretend. We don't have to put on any happy face when life is really hard. And we can say, my son needs to come in here sometimes, and that's the best thing for him. And so here he is, right? And then we don't have to pretend, and it feels freeing. And I just want parents to understand that is, if you're struggling in your relationship with your child, guess what? You're not the only parent that struggles. With my son and I, he was the hardest child for me. We struggled every day of our life together. And I just want to tell people, it wasn't all these rainbows and wonderful. And you mentioned my book. I wrote a book, and I'm very open about that. I don't try to say, oh, life was beautiful and now suddenly it's not. I say, there were a lot of things as a parent I wish I had done differently. I wish I had allowed my children greater expression and the opportunity to be who they really were, versus trying to force them to fit who I felt they should be.
No, I agree with that 100%. I've been talking about that a lot because I've found the error in my ways, and having a 21-year-old, I already raised an entire adult, and now I have a 9 and an 11-year-old. And I see the not letting her dye her hair, or not, allowing her to have ear piercings or whatever. Those are silly things to be caught up on and to stop your child's creativity from, because it really stifled her self-esteem, it stifled her confidence in herself. And of course, her and I have, patched up our relationship, and I've taken all my please forgive me's and thank you for being so understanding about your life now. And just let her know that through those experiences, I'm now going to allow my 9-year-old to color her hair. We even got her some leave-in hair color. She loves to just put it in and then take a bath and let the water turn colors.
You know what?
It's not hurting anything.
Yeah. I think, so many people from I want to say my generation, we believe that if we condone our children's behavior or they're doing something that's outside societal norms or something that we don't agree with, that suddenly we have to accept and take responsibility for their actions. And that's not the case, right?
Yeah, no.
And I look back, my husband was a retired military colonel. So you can only imagine two A-type personality parents, and the house is going to be run a certain way and we're going to do certain things. And you better not, do anything that's going to hurt the integrity of the galley name, right?
Yeah.
And I look back on that and I think, what if my child as a teenager had come and said, Mom, I'm pregnant, or Mom, I'm gay. Now I see that I would behave totally different from what I would have done before.
Yeah.
Before I might have been very, severe and said, well, now you have to do this, right? Now instead of being a dictator as a parent, I want to be an advocate. I want to be their guide and say, okay, if that's the case, now how do you see your life, or what do you plan to do? And not that they can run away from consequences of their actions, but allow them to kind of take on those consequences, but do it from a position of they have someone to help and guide them because they're young.
Yeah.
I look back on my teenage life and I'm like, I made so many mistakes, right?
Yeah.
and our kids are going to make mistakes, and let's not condemn them for learning.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree with that. What a learning experience being a parent has been. And, she was my stepdaughter. And so I feel like there was a lot of pressure to raise her perfectly because she wasn't mine. And I didn't want to mess up in a sense. I wanted to be the best, but in that, you lose sense of who they are really supposed to be. I heard this wonderful quote that it says, if you live every day trying to be who you're supposed to be, you'll never end up being who you really are.
Yes.
And that's so true, that all of these, external pretenses of who you have to be in society, those don't fit our norms in our home. And you said something earlier about just moving, being in a very adventurous family growing up. And I laugh and tell people all the time, I feel like a gypsy that owns a home. Like we have like this no rules with lots of boundaries. Does that make sense even? But it does for us, we don't have rules for this is what time you eat. This is what time you have to do your schoolwork. This is what time you have to go to bed. We've removed the limits that we put on those types of society rules. And we've embraced the flexibility in the boundaries that we've given our kids to make their own choices and become more independent. Even though they're little, they still, okay, well, I'm hungry now, so I'm going to eat something. Well, that provides a great sense of not overeating, not emotionally eating, all of these things, because it's just she's following her own body's biology, right? And not society's idea that 12 o'clock means she has to stick a sandwich in her mouth.
Right.
So,
right.
And no. I think it's different for everybody, but.
Right. Well, I was going to say, and that's beautiful because isn't it wonderful that you can teach your children to take responsibility for themselves and for the things that they need to do while they're still in your home? Because I think so many times children leave home at 18 or 21 and the wheels are off the bus, right? I mean, they sleep all day, they're up all night, and they don't know how to take on the responsibility that now we can do whatever we want. Well, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but there are consequences, right?
That's right.
And I think it's beautiful to try to help our kids, manage that, especially within the context of a home life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, having all of these conversations, I think that's so important. And even in knowing that I was going to be having this conversation with you, it gave me the time to sit down my little 9-year-old. Yeah,
Yes.
it seems young and it seems daunting to have that kind of a conversation, but it's relevant and it's important and it's
It is,
necessary.
yes. Well, especially when you know that there are 9 years old out there,
Exactly.
and they are taking their life, and you're like, when I was 9, I was playing on the playground, I was running outside, I was climbing trees.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking of ways to kill myself.
No.
And yet the reality is there are some kids that are so traumatized by something, or
Yeah.
they're distraught, or they're uncertain, or they've been bullied, or whatever it is, that's all they can think of, is that I want to end this pain, and they don't know any other way to end the pain than by taking their life. And I think as parents, our job is to create a safe place where your child can come to you and tell you what's going on and be very open, and we're not shutting them down, and we're not judging them because they tell us about their fears, or we brush them aside and, oh no, that's not true.
Yeah.
We need to be very open and listen, so that we don't have regrets later. Like,
Yeah.
I have regrets that I didn't ask my son, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How are things going? I just assumed that because he had friends and had hobbies and activities, and he was a freshman at the University of Utah, I just assumed life was good and that he was happy. And yet he had, for several years, I found this out later from a friend of his, for several years he had been struggling. And coming from a parent who had bipolar, I always watched my children for any kind of unstableness. And even though I watched him, I still missed the signs.
Yeah.
And so we don't always know. We're not perfect at knowing this, and we
Yeah.
need to have check-ins.
I agree. And, that brings up another really good point, that kind of thing I'm trying to advocate more for, and that's diagnoses. And that's supporting your child and getting therapy support, or even a diagnosis of it is not a stigma.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a bad thing to look at. It is offering them services and freedom and independence for the rest of their life. When you're able to get those, I, being in the autism community, so many times run into families that, it took 5 years for us to get a diagnosis. And so now we're here in this struggle where 5 years ago, we really could have used these kinds of services. I tell parents all the time, if you have a feeling in your gut, you don't listen to the doctor that said no first. You go to somebody else. You go to 12 people. You find the answers that you feel are right for you. Because as a parent. And luckily for me, I love to educate myself. I love to get all the resources and all the information, and do tons of research on things. And so, I think that when it was, but going through 12, 13 years of counseling, like I said, with my older daughter, now I'm starting to see, well, wait a second, maybe she has autism. And I'm noticing, and she actually brought it to us and said, hey, what do you guys think about this? And, we've been looking at it in a perspective at a little boy for so many years. And there's so much of a difference. Just like boys are different than girls, autism in girls is different than in boys. And it's so overlooked and it's so missed. And maybe back then we could have gotten her some more help, right? Mm-hmm. And now, just like you, I regret that I didn't have all this knowledge now, but I won't let my other kids fall behind because of it now.
And that's beautiful. I think of my youngest daughter, who's 20, and when she was 20, she went and had a diagnosis, and we found out that she was slightly dyslexic. And she got good grades in school. She got A's, but she had to fight for those A's and struggle for those A's, right? And I never thought maybe there was, some disconnect there. I could tell sometimes that she would get distracted very easily, but I never thought to maybe go get some resources or testing. And so now, being in college, she's able to have just a few tweaks in the way things happen. Like, for example, if there's going to be a test and it's online, she gets 5 minutes ahead of time to just read through the questions online. Wonderful. First. those 5 minutes make a total difference in her life because she's able to focus versus, being
Scattered.
unable to read a lot of stuff and being scattered. And so that's beautiful that you're recognizing, hey, if maybe you think something's off, just, and it can be a little thing, just like she's struggling a little bit more than her siblings. Even though she's doing well in school, she's still struggling a little bit. Go in
Exactly.
and question and find out maybe there's a reason behind it. And with the tips that the doctor gave her, she was able to, focus and do better in her studies, and it's made all the difference in the world.
Agreed. Yeah, I also, my daughter is also dyslexic, and I could see the signs of it when she was in kindergarten. And in first and second grade, I had, asked her teachers, can you please test her? Can you please get this fixed? Oh no, she's so bright, she's so friendly, she's so emotionally intelligent. I mean, she's like 5 going on 30. The girl likes to sew, come on. It's just the sweetest thing. But yes, she's dyslexic. And now, we've had her homeschooled for the last year. And I also have been homeschooling my son for several years. And so we have a really great company that we work with and really good relationships set up. So when I said to them, you need to get her help for dyslexia and for tutoring, they just said, absolutely. They didn't question it. They didn't say, no, she's so sweet. It was just like, if that's what you say, Sarah, that's what it is. And now she's getting help.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you look at boys, who are often diagnosed with ADHD or something, and they're acting out because they don't want to hold still. They can't hold still, right?
Yeah.
And that was my son. But sweet little girls, they
Yeah.
aren't acting out in the same ways, and so they don't always get the help.
Yeah. It's devastating in a way that we can't make it easier for teachers or whoever needs to have the access to do so, right? So hopefully we can make some changes in the future, just doing that. But I don't want to get too off track from our great conversation, but I think this is really important because knowing your kids really, isn't that the start?
Yes, it is absolutely the start. And that's one of my biggest regrets with my son's passing, is that I never thought to ask him. Even though there was a couple years ago before my son's death, there was a high school 2 cities over from us. They had 9 suicides within a 9-week period.
Oh my goodness.
And once again, being completely ignorant, I was like, oh, that's outside, that's over there. Never thinking to ask my child how he was doing, how this might affect him, or, because I'm sure he heard about it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think that just simple ways of checking in, we've been starting to implement just like, just for the time being in the last few months, just card tournaments, right? We just sit down, we play Uno, we play all week long. Whoever wins at the end of the week gets a prize. And it just keeps us every day. I know that we're busy, we're doing our work at home, we're moving around, but we all know that when it's time to put cards, that everybody puts everything away, turn the music on, and we laugh and we have a great time. And we're really building that family community within our own family, that trust, that bond, and that dynamic where, when she comes up to things in her life, hopefully. And I say she because I think my daughter will be more, widely exposed to things in the world than my son will. We have to prepare her now for this conflict resolution, for having her confidence built before she gets into these situations. Because you have to support them on their journey, and you can't control it.
Right. They are not little miniature you, right? And that's important. And I love that you do something together as a family. For us, my husband was very adamant that we would have family dinner together. So since the kids were little, and I was working a corporate job and he was working from home, and so he got the dinners ready more often. And many times I was like, hey, I'm going to be late. Why don't you just go ahead and feed the kids? It's more efficient. That was my idea.
Yeah.
Efficient, right? And he would be like, nope, we're going to wait for you, even if it was a little bit later. And I really feel like doing something as best we could, even when the kids were teenagers, they were expected, if they could be home for dinner, they were expected to be here.
Yeah.
And having some kind of touch point throughout the day as a family that creates a bond that you can't get by, hey, we'll go on a week vacation in the
Yeah,
summer and that will
no.
make up for all these lost time, right?
No, that is for sure. I really have appreciated even in this last year being able to be my daughter's teacher. Like the time that it gives us to spend together one on one. I mean, we're in the house together. That's a no brainer. And everybody is, right? Everybody's
Right.
stuck inside with somebody. But it's not just being stuck inside with somebody, it's getting to know them on a very personal level and just really showing them who you are and really learning who they are. Because, yeah, she needs to see that when I go to the grocery store and I'm happy and friendly and waving to everybody, and then I come home and I'm grouchy. Well, it's real life, right? I don't want to show everybody at the grocery store that I'm like grouchy, and I'm usually not when I'm in those situations because it's a different type of situation.
Yes.
Um, but it's important for her to see that, especially as family, we support each other's moods and changing behaviors and things like that, and just really try to uplift each other.
Exactly. And that's beautiful because your children need to know that you have their back, even when they're grumpy
Yeah.
or when they're frustrated. Because I know a lot of times my son, he was a sweet boy to everybody but mom. And it was so frustrating. And I almost feel like he had a way to vent. Like I was his outlet where he could feel safe, even though I was
Yes.
frustrated in a way that he could vent and still be safe in that.
No, I completely agree. And I think when we provide that home setting for our kids, that really flourishes. And I remember my daughter's kindergarten and going in and going to parent teacher conference and saying, well, how is she? Is she bossy? How are you? She is like, what? Oh my gosh. She is tender. She is kind. She's shy. And I was like, wait, who are we talking about here?
Oh yes.
Who in the
Same
world
here.
are we talking about? Because this one, she's the boss at home. Like everybody does what she says, everybody, yes, yes, I'll do it, Anna. And so it's so funny to see this. But that's what it is. She feels so safe at home to be able to be herself but she doesn't it when she's out in public, strangers don't make her feel as safe. I'm thankful for that. Right. we don't
Right.
we don't want her to feel completely safe with strangers out in the world. So I think that that's a great thing to start building, because when she's a teenager, I bless my older daughter's heart, I don't want to go through the same things. I don't want
No.
to struggle in the same way, and I don't want to see her struggle the same way either.
Yeah. And unfortunately, oldest children usually are the experimental, the guinea pig, right? And
Yes.
and hopefully, as we as parents, having gone through different struggles, that we can help other parents who are or sort of stepping into this so that they can get help and resources earlier
Yeah.
in their child's development.
Yeah. And that's just all that really is. And even if you can just find, a mom to talk to or a group to belong in on Facebook where you can just be yourself and vent and, get some great ideas, or, find these kinds of groups for your kids. Maybe there's
Exactly.
so much struggle right now going from in person to online, and I can't imagine how much really suicide prevention is needed right
Right.
now in this
Well,
day and age.
I look at 2020 and there was a lot of isolation and uncertainty and fear, and all of those things contribute to the suicide ideation. And so during 2019, I just felt this strong urge to write my story. It wasn't easy, and it took me a year to write it. I just, it was so emotional. Um, Going in writing the chapters of reliving the day my son died, right, or any of that, and yet I felt that people needed to see the reality of what could happen if they didn't wake up.
Yeah.
And then I just felt the urgency that this needed to come out, and I published it in 2020. And I looking back, I realized that there are so many people, and specifically kids and young adults especially, who are struggling to have hope to move forward, or they've been alone, and kids kids, suicide rates are up.
Oh,
And
yeah.
kids are just saying, I can't connect with somebody. I mean, mom and dad are great, but I can't connect with my friends. I can't laugh with them and be with them in the
Yeah.
way that kids need to be together in order to grow and thrive. And
Yeah.
so we as parents need to be especially attentive to the mental wellness of our children
Yeah.
this, right now and in this past few months.
I agree. I think that it's taken us as parents a step back to, have a different perspective to see this because to be honest, our son is more high risk. And so we've put higher restrictions on our home than all of the people on our block. I'll put it that way. And all of those children have continued to be playing outside together. And my child has been forced to look out the window and watch all of these other children continue their relationships and their friendships. And in that, trying to still build her social, emotional well-being, I guess, and learning how to navigate social situations because how do you do that when you're stuck indoors with your family all day long?
Exactly.
So difficult.
Right. And these are huge complexities that we've never had to deal with before.
Exactly.
I think 2020 helped reinforce those things that were most important to us. And as we move forward and maybe come out of the pandemic and we go back to, what normal life is, I want to say, I just would hope that parents can reevaluate and say, my child doesn't need to be in 4 different activities all at once. Taking them from one thing to another and just rushing, that's not the best interest of their mental wellness
Yeah.
and who they are. And you know what? If they're not captain of the team, if they're not first chair in orchestra, you know what? They're going to be fine. They
Yeah.
are going to be fine, and not push them so much that they go over the edge. And that's an issue as a parent. We want our children to excel, but at what point?
Yeah.
We need to get their feedback and be open to them saying, mom, I'm not the best in math. I might need help, or I'm never going to be that physicist that you think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just learn to love your child where they are.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think, and we often tease our daughter that she argues so much. She's going to be the best attorney on the planet someday. But what she's really great at is designing things. She is incredible. She has the most brilliant mind and can just see an empty room and fill it, not only with and it's not like gaudy like you'd think a little kid would do. It's elegant and it's beautiful. And I'm just in shock. Like, like I said before, when I take her to the store and she finds outfits that I would never, ever think to myself for myself to wear. And I always look the best because she sees me differently. She looks at me in a different way than I look at myself. And yeah, I think that's really special thing to have with them. But
right. And if you can cultivate, these things that she's able to do well, that helps give her a sense of importance and I can do things, and that's
yeah,
a beautiful thing to cultivate. As we're taught that you need to have, I think it's 5 compliments for every negative that you might say, and that's so important. Everybody wants to know that they're loved and accepted, and especially our children.
yeah, absolutely. And it's so important for them to know. It's so important for them to know that things that you come up against, like I said, hair color, piercings, comic books, whether or not you like them or not, all of those things that you might not be your interest. If you don't allow your child to express and even try out, it only leads to regression and to contentment, just kind of this holding things, resentments, right? Which just fester into an unhappy, unhealthy person and relationship. So I agree. One thing that we've tried to install in our children is, me growing up, it was always love one another, da 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 da. Well, I told my daughter the first thing, if anybody says, who do you love the most? You. It's you always come first. You always, and this isn't to be selfish. It's to be selfless with yourself, right? You have to have that inner love to be able to even give love forward. So yeah.
Perfect. Yes, because if we're always looking outside to someone else filling us with love, it will always be empty, right?
Yes.
And that's great to tell your child that, and to give them the sense that they're worthwhile just because they exist.
Yeah. And like you said, the poor, oldest child, she was the guinea pig. Now we can perfect that. No, just kidding. Perfect the youngest child. No, they're all perfect and they're all individual. They're all unique. They all have their own special ways of being them. So embrace
Exactly.
that. It was
Yes.
such an honor, a pleasure to have you here with me today. Um, where can people find your book and the name of the book? And
So you can look on my website, which is larkdeangalley.com, or on Amazon. It's also there. It's called Learning to Breathe Again, Choosing to Heal After Losing a Loved One to Suicide. And the audience that I wrote to was, number one, parents who are struggling in their relationships with their children, so that you can see that, it's not all rainbows out there. We all struggle. And what are the regrets that I have, and what do I wish I could have done differently? And then also those who are grieving, who maybe have lost someone, and not necessarily to suicide, but they've lost someone, and how do you move forward? Because that's so critical. We all grieve differently, and it depends on our relationship with the one who has passed. And it's just something that we need to allow. My husband is in a different stage of his grief. Each of my children are in a different stage. We've had to allow each other to be where each of us is in our grief, and then to honor that and to help them in the place they are. And so that's something I feel very blessed to be able to talk about this message to people, because I feel that I've kind of been given this mission to help other people understand that this is an important topic. It's a relevant topic, and based on statistics, if you personally haven't been affected by suicide, you will be. That's how huge the reach is. And I just want to give a call out to parents to wake up and to see what's going on. And on my website, larkdeangalley.com, there is a tab for resources, because as I was talking about this, people would say, well, what have you found? What can I do? And I'm like, oh, I better write some stuff down. So there are a few things there. You can also Google, free suicide prevention resources in my community, because they're different based on where you live. You can start there as well. But there are some wonderful resources. I think it's becoming a bigger issue, a more accepted topic of discussion, which is so important. And I just hope that you as parents are willing to talk about it before it becomes an issue in your home.
Yep, I agree. Talk about it sooner than later. And, if you have younger children, maybe learn how to talk to them about it on their level, because it's so important. And not only will you foster that relationship with your child, but also maybe that when we come up to things we don't understand, we face them with fear. And if they don't have to face those things with fear, think of the possibilities that could occur for them otherwise.
Right. A lot of times we think, well, if I talk about it, then that's going to put it in their mind. And that's not the case, right? They're already thinking about this. They're already hearing about this.
Yes.
And so we need to help them navigate and help them understand why someone might choose to end their life, and what maybe some alternatives were to that choice.
Yes, definitely. Yes, and thank you so much for sharing such a personal story with us. And I know that it really resonated with me personally. And like I had told you before, the first time I met you, the only thing I could tell is that you are full of love and light. And thank you so much. I just honor
Thanks,
you
Sarah.
for being here. Thank you.
Sarah.
And we will definitely be staying in touch and catching up with you on any further projects you might have in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
keeps you warm at night when you are cold. I'll grab some blankets from my bed, wrap them around your chest, and I'll pull you close. We'll flip some channels to find out there's nothing on right now to ease your mind. Sit back, relax, there is no rush, no need to speed things up. All we have is time to think about the future, forget about the past. Time to figure out a way to make this moment last, to make this moment last, to make this moment last. So let's make this the kind of love that we've been dreaming of when we sleep at night. We'll get a little house to live in, have a couple kids, and we'll sleep tight. 'Cause baby, all we really need are just a couple things to stay alive, and everything else in between. Just trust my heart, you'll see we're slowly coming. Time to think about the future, forget about the past. Time to figure out a way to make this moment last, to make this moment last, to make this moment last. Sunrises, sunsets, I won't let you forget that I need you. Spring comes as spring goes, forever you will know that I love you. Sunrises, sunsets, I won't let you forget that I need you. Spring comes as spring goes, forever you will know that I love you.